What is economics? Economics is the science of analyzing the production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. So guys, sit back and relax. This video will be about demand,
Did you see as well that there's a notice there stating that one person only can buy 2 packets of sugar?
2 packets of sugar?
Yeah.
Why?
Because of the demand, they reduce the amount they can buy.
Demand in sugar?
Yeah.
But I have to buy.
No, the sales person won't allow to buy. They only can, like,
Okay, sorry.
Hello? Hi there.
Where are you?
I'm in home now. We'll move in a while. Where are you now?
I came to Giant, but I'll make a move now. Is that we meet at campus, huh?
Before I come to campus, I'll go petrol pump to fill up my fuel, okay? Meet you in a 15 minutes.
Yeah, sure. Bye.
Bye.
Terima kasih.
What is this beer and sugar went on? I texted them, they never replied to my message. Say they've been 10 minutes now. Where is this girl?
Oh, here they are.
Hey, hi.
Hi.
Okay, everything is different from now. And even that sugar will become demand nowadays. Exactly. What is this so seriously talking about? I don't understand. No, Akka, today morning my mom asked me to buy sugar, a packet of sugar, because we're having a function in the house. But I went to Giant, I only can get 2 packets of sugar. They say the sugar is in demand now. The same goes for her.
What happened to you?
Exactly the same. Today morning, I went to petrol pump to fill up my tank. Usually, I'll give 50 ringgit to fill up my full tank. But today, not even after, I paid like 60 ringgit for my petrol. So it's like the petrol also in demand now.
Wait. What is demand? What are you guys talking about? I don't understand what is demand.
Supply and demand are fundamental concepts in economics. Usually, they're represented by a graph like this. So what does this mean? Well, let's start with the demand curve. In short, a demand curve shows how much of a good people will want at different prices. What happens when there's a big sale? Well, at a lower price, people buy more. More shirts, more pants, more video games, and they do stuff like this. This is what happens on Black Friday when retailers lower their prices to get people to buy stuff for Christmas. The demand curve illustrates the intuition for why people go nuts on Black Friday. Price is shown on the vertical axis, and quantity is shown on the horizontal. Here's the normal price, and here's the Black Friday reduced price. Simply put, the quantity demanded increases as the price gets lower. But let's delve a little deeper. There's a different demand curve for every good or service out there, but the ideas are the same. So, let's look at the demand curve for one of the most important products in the world, oil. Oil is used in a wide variety of products, from fueling cars and planes to heating homes and making plastic for rubber duckies. Looking at the demand curve for oil, we see a familiar relationship between price and the quantity demanded. At a high price, $55 per barrel, there's a relatively low demand, let's say 5 million barrels. At $20 per barrel, 25 million barrels are demanded. As the price goes down, the demand for oil increases. And at $5 per barrel, 50 million barrels of oil are demanded. But there's more to why the demand curve looks like this. As we mentioned before, oil has many uses. Some of those uses are high-value uses, uses for which oil has few substitutes. An example would be jet fuel. Right now, you can't fly jets on corn or natural gas. If you want planes that fly, you're stuck with using oil. Other uses are low-value uses, like making gasoline or plastic for these guys. When oil prices are relatively low, the oil that is being demanded is used for high and low-value goods alike. As the price of oil goes up, so does the price of making plastic and gasoline. And at some point, the cost of these low-value use products will get high enough that some people might skip buying a rubber ducky altogether or buy a substitute like a wooden bath toy. Same goes for gasoline. As the price rises, people will economize. They will buy more fuel-efficient cars or forego that road trip completely. For these consumers, the benefit of buying these products is too little to justify the cost. At these high prices, the demanders that are left are the ones who value oil the highest. For them, the benefit of, say, having planes that fly outweighs the increased cost. They still demand oil. So, with a simple line, the demand curve summarizes all the many and diverse ways that people respond to a change in price. But it doesn't stop here.
The theory that the world will someday come to rely less on oil is not new. However, the way in which that outcome may occur has shifted from a story of peak supply to one of peak demand. The development of new sources of supply, like oil sands, ultra-deep water, and shale, have helped to debunk the theory that the world will soon run out of oil. The consensus now is that there are enough recoverable reserves to power the global economy for decades to come. But an emerging set of dynamics on the demand side have opened new questions and created a surprisingly wide range in forecasts for future oil demand.
Well, the world right now is using just a little less than 100 million barrels a day of oil. It's everywhere, mainly transportation, but there are industrial uses of oil, and oil is found in everyday common objects like the clothes we wear. There's even oil in food as preservatives and in some medicines like aspirin.
In the last 10 years, oil demand has grown by 1 million barrels a day.
There's a lot of discussion about the future of oil, so let's talk about it. Globally, we consume 96 million barrels of oil every day. This is the same as 48 supertankers of oil every 24 hours. So what is all that oil used for? Well, we as consumers, we use almost all of it. If you take a barrel of oil, 42% of it will be turned into gasoline for our commuter vehicles. 28% will be turned into diesel, which runs our commercial fleet, including trucks, trains, and barges used in transporting goods. 12% is split between fuel oil and aviation fuel for heating and travel, respectively, and the last 18% is used for asphalt, petrochemicals, and plastics. Oil has no substitute. Renewable energy, nuclear, coal, none of them can create the gasoline, jet fuel, or asphalt that runs our communities. Understanding the future of oil demand ultimately means understanding the future of population. Let us explain. Canada is a part of a group called the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or the OECD, made up of Canada, the US, most countries in Europe, and a handful of others, which are what we often refer to as developed nations. The OECD has 1.3 of the 7.2 billion people on Earth, and we are by far the biggest energy users. However, our population is stable, and we are becoming more efficient with our energy use. The developing world is a little different. While China has settled out at about 1.4 billion people, or 5 times the population of America, the rest of the developing world is still growing. India, who already has 1.3 billion people, is estimated to add another 300 million people by 2040. The rest of the world, including Latin America, the Middle East, Asia, and Africa, who already have 2.9 billion people, will add a further 1.5 billion people in the same period. This means that in the developing world, it is likely that an additional 1.7 billion people will be added, totaling 7.3 billion in the developing world alone. In developing nations, people are moving into big cities, gaining access to electricity, and buying their first cars. Each person in the developing world is estimated to increase their energy by more than 60% by 2040 as they move towards a standard of living the developed world has enjoyed for decades. Of the 96 million barrels of oil produced today, it's split about half and half between developed and developing nations. A quarter century from now, in 2040, as the OECD countries become more efficient with energy use, oil demand is projected to go down from 46 down to 38 million barrels per day. That's a reduction of 8 million barrels of oil per day. In contrast, developing nations, who currently use 41 million barrels per day, are projected to use 26 million more by 2040, totaling 67 million barrels per day as the result of increased urbanization. Combined, this means over the next 25 years, despite a wide adoption of the electric car in wealthy countries and increased energy efficiency around the world, the global demand for oil will likely go up by another 18 million barrels per day until about 2040, where it is expected to level out and start to decline. In other words, growth in population and increased urbanization will outpace the electric car and energy efficiency for oil consumption. These are projections from the International Energy Agency, the gold standard of energy models. The biggest unknown for the future of oil demand is the rise of the electric car. There is a wide range of opinions on the speed that our society will adopt this transformational technology. Some believe that in as little as 15 years, the majority of our cars will be electric, displacing much of our oil use. Others are more skeptical at how quickly the entire global vehicle fleet will be able to make this transition. While it might be unsettling for many, oil consumption will increase for years to come. While public efforts to reduce our dependency on oil often target oil producers or pipelines, it's important to understand that oil consumption is driven by consumer demand. History has shown over and over that targeting the producer of high-demand products has little to no effect on curbing consumption.
U.S. sugar policy is based on the economic principle that supply should reflect demand. Too much supply and low prices put farmers out of business. Too little supply and consumers get burned with high grocery bills. Here's how America keeps it balanced. At the beginning of every year, the USDA estimates sugar demand, usually about 11 million tons a year. Then America brings in sugar from 40 different countries we have trade deals with. That's a minimum of 1.5 million tons. Add that to subsidized Mexican sugar that flows in through a loophole in NAFTA, and the total imports reach about 3 million tons. What's left of the market can be filled by U.S. farmers. And if they have a bad crop, more imports pick up the slack. That's it. No subsidy checks at all. The only time the government spends a dime is to deal with massive oversupplies, something that's extremely rare. Sugar policy cost nothing under the Farm Bill that ran from 2002 to 2007. It was a no-cost policy again for the Farm Bill, written in 2008 to last through 2012. No one can predict the future, but we know that $0 were spent on sugar policy from 2002 to 2012. Not many government programs can claim the same. It might not cost much, but sugar policy keeps unneeded subsidized imports from flooding the market and upsetting the supply-demand balance. Global subsidies have made sugar the world's most distorted commodity market. And absent U.S. policy, those foreign subsidies would bankrupt efficient U.S. producers, leaving us fully dependent on imports. If you like being dependent on foreign oil, then you'll love depending on unreliable foreign suppliers for your food. That doesn't mean the American market is closed. America is the biggest sugar importer in the world. It also doesn't mean that U.S. consumers are paying a big premium at the grocery checkout. Grocery shoppers around the world pay on average 14% more for sugar than we do. U.S. food manufacturers also pay less for sugar than most of their foreign competitors, and low U.S. prices are remarkably consistent. The sugar in a candy bar cost the same in 2013 as it did 30 years earlier. That candy bar, on the other hand, costs 4 times more today. That's not saying everyone loves sugar policy. Companies that make candy bars and other sweets want to boost profits with artificially cheap sugar, no matter where it comes from. For years, big candy makers lobbied in favor of foreign sugar dependence. Foreign governments would subsidize cheap sugar, they figured. Then, in 2006, they asked U.S. taxpayers to fund $1.3 billion a year in U.S. sugar subsidies. Sugar farmers said no thank you to that handout. Now, confectioners are asking Congress to mandate permanent oversupplies, essentially capping sugar prices at 1980s levels forever. Sugar farmers have a better plan. Continue America's current policy and target global subsidies. Eliminate foreign subsidies. Then eliminate U.S. policy and let a true free market take hold. It's a simple, common sense approach.